we can fight for relationship. We can make sure that we're involved to the extent that we can, right? We've talked about several of these things, especially to the dads. Make sure that you find a way to be interested in whatever your kids are interested in.
I always want my children to know if something has happened, if they've done something wrong, if they've made a dumb choice, I want them to run to us. I want them to always feel safe to do that, because what's the first thing we do? Like if we've done something grievous, it's like classic Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. They messed up, made a bad choice, and what did they do? They hid. They didn't run to the Father. They hid because of shame. Because if a child knows the first call that they make, I need my mom and dad, then I think it breaks a lot of shame tendencies off of kids. How do I make our home one that they can come to me? Because if we recoil in horror and then just berate them, we're not going to be their first call. We're not going to be their first thing. They're going to hide things.
And if you're not their first call, who is?
A friend or somebody that's not safe, maybe. I've been thinking a lot about, now that our kids are grown, and regardless of any age of children, any stage of parenting that you're at, people deal with regret. How big of a part, now that we are where we're at, how big of a part does regret play in your life over that you can look back over the course of raising kids or being married to me? And please don't say that you regret marrying me.
There's no regrets there.
Because that would be really unfortunate and really awkward.
It'd be
at this point.
on air to open up with that.
We'd have to just cut it out.
Yeah. Regret. What role does regret have in either marriage or parenting?
Well, for you personally.
Well, it's morphed. I think a lot of us, me included, used to live with a lot of regret. And that is I think it's a very, very poor representation of what God has for us. Because we look back on all the different experiences, even the ones that were horrendous, wouldn't wish on anybody. They are what shaped who we are, and it shaped who our boys are. And so even when we were talking about doing a series on, looking back, wouldn't have started with regret. However, I think looking back with reflection is what I would use instead of regret. Mm-hmm. Reflection is something that I can look back on, and then I ask the question, what can I learn? Now, when I'm emotionally tied to something, or it impacts me personally, it's a lot harder to look at it with reflection and not regret. When I'm looking at you or any one of my clients and coaching them, it's real easy for me to say, let's look at it from a perspective of reflection and not regret. Regret is a very negative connotation. It puts us in a place of poverty thinking. And so I don't know that I would agree with regret now, because today I'm emotionally stable.
Yeah.
Now you catch me when I'm really tired or really hungry, and might be a different story. But to answer your question, what role does regret have? I would say the right answer would be it doesn't.
I'm looking for your honest answer, not what you think is the right answer.
I have, I guess, regrets on some of the things, the way I handled the boys or handled things with you. But I would have to say I don't dwell on them, because now it's like, okay, we made it past that. We've repented to each other, apologized to the boys. Right now, what I would be looking at is those were poor choices at the moment, but God used them for good. Yeah. So I would have to say, honestly, I don't have regrets with the way we've raised our family. I have some things that I'm dealing with what's called business regrets. But even then, it's like they happened. They're in the past. What can I learn from them? So I wrestle with that more than I wrestle with regrets of our kids. But, we're well into empty nest at this point. They've been out of the house. And so I think it's easier from that. It's like we're in a healthier state family-wise.
It kind of goes back to what we were talking about this morning when I was getting ready about God's will. Like, how do you know, what God's will is versus this isn't God's will. but this was man's will. And like, how much power do we put that? This is like a big, deep, cavernous issue, you know? And I'm sure there's people on all theological sides of this that have opinions about it. But
Yeah.
I think regret is one of those things that it's like, wait, how can I have regret if I feel like when the Bible says all things, God takes all things, even the bad things, and works all things together for the good of those who love him and are working according to his purposes.
Yeah, and even anytime you bring in Bible stories or anything else in this context, I always immediately go to the story of Joseph. Do you think he had regrets that he told his brothers his dream? Do you think he had regrets in letting them know that they were going to be bound down to him?
Mm-hmm.
And then he's now in a pit.
Probably.
Then he gets sold into slavery. It's like you just keep going into, everyone loves the end of the story. And now that we're able to read the end of the story, we can read the beginning parts and think, oh, it's going to work out.
Yeah.
But I think if we could have that perspective in modern day, it's like, okay, the things that we're going through right now, they're going to work out. It's much easier to read the story of someone else, right? If you read the autobiography of anybody that's what we would consider and deem highly successful today, it was a tumultuous journey.
Yeah.
It wasn't
linear, like
no.
just your steady growth trajectory. It was
so that context of everything works together for good. If we know that to be true, I guess capital IF, if we know that to be true, then I think that helps minimize the issue of regret.
Yeah.
Because we know that at some point it is all going to work out for the good.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, on the personal side, I think I have fewer regrets. Do I have things I wish I would have done differently? I do. Dozens, but I don't think I would not classify them as a regret.
Yeah. Good answer.
Good.
Yeah.
Looking back over the course of raising kids.
Yes.
We're kind of morphing this.
Yeah.
Instead of just talking about empty nest.
Yes.
We've had enough questions from folks. It kind of pushes us into, well, how do we prepare, like we have the authority, but how do we prepare families to get ready for empty nest?
Because empty nest begins in those early years, really. If you think
absolutely.
about it.
I agree.
Yeah.
And so if there's a lot of those questions, some of the things it's like, when we look back, would we do things differently with the boys? And I was on a podcast this last week. Shout out to Jeff Zog at Dad Awesome.
Yeah.
Dad Awesome is a great resource for dads.
Yeah. And
he's a girl dad. He's got 4 daughters.
Oh.
So we're the guy dad. So, but it was a great conversation. Dadawesome.org. Definitely, if you're a guy that needs some good resources, I'd check it out. But he asked a question, looking back over the raising of your boys, what would you do differently? A common question. I get that a lot when we're doing the podcasts and talking about that book or whatever. But then he asked it from a different angle. He said, what would your boys look back on their childhood and wish their dad had done differently? First time I'd ever been asked that. So I really had to stop and think.
That could be a loaded question.
Oh, yeah. And it was, and obviously they weren't on the podcast to refute my answer. So my answer had to be right. But then he asked, well, what would your wife, looking back on that same period of time, what would Allison say that she wishes that you could have done differently? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where I think I would love to have some of those discussions is, if we're going to be a resource to other parents, whether it's empty nest, pre-empty nest, or they still have toddlers, littles at home. If we were to look back on those early days, what do you think your boys would say, I wish mom would have done differently? And I'll give that same answer because I've had some time to think about it. But what would you think? What do you think the boys would say about mom?
Because of what rolls around in my head and looking back and being where I am now, I feel like maybe if they took the time to really sit and think about this for a while, they may come up with different answers. But I feel like they probably would have enjoyed if I would have been less task oriented and task focused and more just sit in the moment. Because I regretfully, and some of this is personality, but I can't blame all of it on personality, because I feel like just because I might have a personality be task oriented, I can still work on more connection. And I was connected to them emotionally. Like we had long talks about things. Like I really did back when we had, as I was raising kids, when we had like the phone on the cord, the rotary, the landline. And like, there were times like kids just innately know when you're on the phone, whether they see you or not, they just know. And I was the mom who I would hang up and deal with something that needed to be dealt with instead of screaming at the kids. And I'm not saying I never screamed. But I was not the mom who sat with the Play-Doh and silly putty and, did all the things like that. Like I didn't do the messy stuff because the mess drove me crazy. Like I couldn't handle the mess. So they probably would have had more fun if I could have been more messy and less focused on things being tidy. And I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Those are some of my regrets looking back. Like, so if you're a mom listening.
So is it a regret, like you defined what we talked about a while ago? Or is it a reflection?
It's probably, I don't know, probably a reflection. Yeah. Because at this point, it's not like if you ask any one of our boys or look at our boys, they're not going to be like, oh, I just got done with a therapy session because we didn't play a lot of Play-Doh when I was growing up, that kind of thing, But I think it's a reflection then, probably so, of I wish I had fostered more of that. We played a lot of outside things. Like they didn't just sit inside and play video games because
we didn't really have them.
Well, we kind of did once they kind of grew up, but we were outside people, but still, yeah, that's a reflection. So, but yeah, I was very tasked. Like we have to do this and we need to do this. And some of that I feel like built some routine and some things into them. That's good, but yeah.
Well, for me, and it's not just the dads, but I'm going to speak directly to the dads.
Okay.
Because one of the things that reflecting back, if I'm going to call it a regret, I don't think I would really call it that, but man, would I do this differently?
Yeah.
And I reference a business book that I recommend to a lot of dads, and it's called The Gap and the Gain.
Yeah.
By Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. And the premise of that is if we're going to live in the gain, we are measuring the amount of progress we've made.
Yeah.
If we live in the gap, we always measure ourselves against where we wanted to be. I was awesome at forcing my boys to live in the gap.
Yeah.
And I say that facetiously because if I could change anything, if I could equip other dads to not do, is to force your kids to live in the gap.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that we don't desire.
So give us an example of that, though.
Oh man, I've got so many, to be honest.
I haven't read the book, but you have. I feel like vicariously, I read books through you because then I hear about books that you read. So I understand the whole gap in the gain because we've talked ad nauseum about stuff like this.
Yeah.
But
first one, and again, I've got so many, I can get goosebumps over it just because, man, I would do anything if I could do that part over.
Mm-hmm.
First one would be their grades.
Yeah.
Let's say a child came in, or our kids came in, and out of 6 subjects, they had 4 A's, a B, and a C. Guess where we focused?
On the C.
Solely on the C. What's wrong with you? You don't apply yourself? If you would, Taylor was one of the most guilty culprits at the midterm.
Yes.
He would have all C's and D's.
Yeah.
And somehow by the end of the semester, he'd have A's and B's. And we used to ride him so hard about if you would just halfway apply yourself.
Yeah.
Well, what happens when these kids with the 4 A's, the B and the C, and all we do is focus on the C?
Yeah.
We are creating performance identity prototypes.
Yeah.
Because all we're doing is telling them, you know what? The great work you're doing over here is completely discounted because you didn't perform. So that's one that I would look at. Did it with sports. I can think of one specifically where Peyton was a sophomore running cross country, had one of the best runs he had ever had. He was so excited. I think he got like 3rd place. he was living in the game because he had performed better than he'd ever had. Guess what I did? I jerked him right down into the gap.
Yeah.
Do you realize that if you would have pumped your arms better on the hill, if you would have cut that corner a little bit, I just took him out of the game and threw him right into the gap.
Yeah.
Now, as an adult now, what I can see is what I'm doing is I'm creating that performance mentality, but I'm also creating a young man that really does perceive that doesn't matter what he does, it's not enough.
Yes.
That is a dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
If I do not provide the environment in my home, and I'm specifically talking to me or any dads or moms, because I know that there's some hard driving moms out there.
Yeah.
But if I create an environment that you are only as good as how you last performed,
Yeah.
they will end up finding validation somewhere else.
Yeah.
I don't want that
Yeah.
for anybody's
Yeah.
kids. The culture alone drives that.
Yeah.
In elementary school, you get stars for perfect attendance. Churches, you get stars for perfect attendance.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere you turn, you're being measured against some arbitrary number.
Well, in careers.
That's where I'm getting into, because in the corporate world, especially in sales, right? I always challenge the boys, if you want to make some good money, you either got to be in sales or own your own business.
Yeah.
But when you're in sales, especially in the corporate level, you're always measured. Everything you do is measured down to daily performance at times. But December 31st, whatever took place, the big eraser comes out at midnight. You start off January 1st, 0. You are nullified. Didn't matter how good of a year you had last year. So the performance identity is going to be hitting our kids anyway.
Yeah.
The last thing I would encourage other dads to do is to feed it. So from looking back, what I would do over again, I would definitely get away from the performance identity that's created. I would leverage to these other dads, get the book. It's great for business. I absolutely love it from the business perspective, but as a dad, as a mom, what can we do to help our kids live in the game? And there's a ton of studies. I'm talking a lot. Are you okay?
I'm okay.
Anything?
I was going to pull a practical example though.
Okay, do it. I'll make a note of what I was going to talk about.
Yeah, no, just from a practical standpoint, the thing to do with grades, like if you have an elementary school age kid or, middle school, high school, whatever, and this same scenario that we're talking about, they come home and they've got like 4 A's, a B and a C. I feel like one of the things that I would do differently is I would ask my child, because we know what our kids are capable of most of the time, but I would ask them, did you do your best? Did you do your absolute best while earning these grades? And, there might be, like, if this is something new and your kid's in high school, it might be like a season where they have to get used to this. But I feel as though when you accept an answer, if they're like, yeah, then at some point they're going to catch on to the thing that's valued in our home is effort instead of the end result.
Good.
Because I agree with you. It's like,
guess what word I wrote down to remind me of where I was headed?
What?
Effort.
Man, it's like we're married.
So there are tons of studies that have come out now in the last probably 4 or 5 years that has measured the difference between rewarding a child's performance, and I'm talking young ones, 5-6-year-old young ones.
Yeah.
How does a child do when they're rewarded based on their performance versus being rewarded based on their effort? Have you seen some of those?
Mm-mm.
So they started out with this big group of 5-year-olds, and they split them up into 2 groups, and they're given like a 3-piece puzzle. I mean, they're big pieces like this. And they're said, you're going to put this puzzle together. We're going to time you, see how you do. We're going to have fun. They just made it fun for both groups. Both groups did remarkably well because it's 3 pieces, right?
Yeah.
So simple.
5-year-olds and a 3-piece puzzle.
Pardon?
5-year-olds and a 3-piece puzzle.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking Kate's 6, and it's like she could put a 3-piece puzzle together like that.
Absolutely. So this one group, they praised the kids and said, you did it so fast and you did it perfectly. The other group said, the effort you put into that was amazing. Great job. Subtle little differences, but one group, you did it perfectly and fast. The other group praised the effort.
Yeah.
Gave them a 5-piece puzzle, then an 8-piece, and then a 12 or whatever, and it got up to be some really difficult puzzles. Every time they finished getting the puzzle together, the 5-piece, it took a little bit more time. They did get it, but they praised the performance and timeline of this group, praised the effort of this group.
Yeah.
Every time the puzzle got harder and harder, the kids that were praised on performance and time got worse and worse. The kids that were praised for effort, they stuck with it, and their times continued to improve to the point where when it got complicated, like 60% of the group over here didn't even start the puzzle.
Wow.
They were afraid of failing, or doing a poor time and not getting praised, whereas this group, they stuck with it. So it's like there's just so many studies now that shows when we praise the effort. So that goes right in line with what you were talking about. Did you give your best effort?
Yeah.
I just think back on the grades thing. If we'd have done that, I believe, hindsight, it would have changed things.
Yeah.
On Peyton's race, if I would have praised the effort, I think it would have changed things. At least would have allowed him to stay in the game.
Yeah.
You know, we were very active, very intentional, which I think that is good, but we were intentional with some wrong ideas.
Well, and I'm even thinking back with Logan, our middle son, like the whole gap in the game thing. Like, you expect little boys to like love sports. Well, Logan didn't love sports. He was good at it when he did it, but he didn't enjoy it. And I feel like we probably didn't do a great job cultivating his other interests, because he was way more creative and things like that. So it's like, that's a kind of a gap in the game thing. Like, we tried to keep him in the sports scene as much as we could, instead of the gain of, okay, where are you strong? What are your interests? It's like, train up a child in the way he should go is like in the way that his natural bent is.
Yeah.
And not all boys are just gonna love sports. They're just not.
All right. So let me poke the bear with the dads again.
Yeah.
It is so easy as a dad to take interest in, let's say you've got 5 kids. It's so easy as a dad to take interest in those kids that have very similar interests to your own.
Yeah.
If I have a child who loves basketball, it's a natural tendency. It's not right, but it's a natural tendency for me to naturally spend more time with him because that was my love language for many years. It would be easier to do that than to shooting guns. Now, I enjoy that now, but I'm just trying to think of an example. What if you have a son or a daughter that has an interest in something that you really don't?
Mm-hmm.
Kate, our granddaughter,
Mm-hmm.
she loves arts and crafts. I don't. But it warrants me sitting there and spending time with her.
And watching her do arts and crafts.
And do it with her. And here, Pop Bear, color. Remember there was a time that she had those rocks and we were painting the rocks?
Yeah.
I was sitting there painting rocks. I would love to say I would have done that as a young dad. I don't know that I would have.
Probably not. I don't think you would have.
And so grateful that, now that we're grandparents, we're learning some of these things. So again, this is maybe some of the things for these younger dads or moms. Find what your kids are interested in. Get out of your freaking comfort zone and be intentional to spend time with them and validate those interests. Yeah. I honestly, for the record, I don't care if I ever paint another rock unless Kate asks me to.
Yeah.
Then I'll have an interest. Or it's fun now, the coins. I always carry Kate coins when we go over to watch them. And being able
That's a whole other story.
It is. Okay, we'll save that for another time. Kate coins.
Kate coins.
Yep.
Yeah.
Carry Kate coins everywhere I go now.
Yeah.
And I don't spend them because they're Kate coins.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Another phrase that this one, I can say I probably do have a regret over.
What?
It's a phrase that I used with you for too long.
We can always do better.
We can always do better.
And we can. There's truth in that.
We can, but I saw the look on your face that triggered you right there.
It didn't trigger me, but
Okay,
I
good.
knew where that was coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think if we were to look back, and what would be something that I think my wife, you're my most recent wife. You knew
Yeah,
that, right?
I do.
So what would my most recent wife say that she wished I'd have done differently?
People are going to think that like you're on your second or third wife, you know?
You're my first
Well,
and
sometimes you might be, because sometimes I wake up with different kind of like personalities.
well, yeah.
Not really, but sometimes I'm not in a very good mood. So,
But anyway, we digress.
yes, we do.
In moments when I look back, is there something that I think you would wish I would have done differently? And it's still the gap in the gain concept, but it was a phrase that you would say, hey, I worked out twice this week or 3 times this week. And what I'm able to see now is you're looking for a validation of the effort. And for some stupid reason, I would put you, instead of the gain, we didn't have this concept back then, right? Instead of me allowing you to live in the gain, I would jerk you back down into the gap by using this phrase, hey, it's great, but we can always do better. And what you heard from that is, oh, you think I'm fat. But you didn't always verbalize it. You just carried and internalized the hurt. And when you internalize the hurt, I wasn't cognizant enough to realize the look in your face at that point was, okay, that didn't land well. And I go about my business thinking everything's fine. And you begin to retreat. And before you know it, we're not even talking. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
That's one of those things that, boy, I really do wish I wouldn't have done that. But I know we've worked our way through that, right?
Yeah.
We good?
We are good. Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But what would even add insult to injury with that would be like, sometimes we would be around a couple and like the husband was always like, oh, baby, you are just the most beautiful thing. Like I'm thinking of one couple that we know that we're related to that, like, sometimes I would be like, oh my gosh, you guys just need to go get a room, And it would also, like, kind of like, there'd be this place in me that I would be like, oh my gosh, like, what would it be like to be married to somebody who like was always like, that's what your focus was. Like, it was always like, you're so gorgeous, you're so beautiful, you're so perfect, you're like, all the things, And so that internalization also made me go, man, like, I'm really missing out on this. And so it made me try harder. I felt like I had to work harder, try harder, because if I tried harder, then you would be like, oh my gosh, you're so hot. Or all those things that women kind of like fantasize over, and they want their husband to think, there's nobody else. And there wasn't anybody else.
No, there wasn't.
But yeah.
And then, my way of thinking, which, I mean, there's a certain amount of logic to it, but it was not 100% accurate, was for whatever reason, I just didn't want you or the boys or whatever else to feel like there was no way for improvement. And so the purpose behind it was, let's always get better. And so you recognize now that phrase, all it does is fuel the performance identity, right? I grew up with that. This is no slight against my parents, because it's like, I love and thrived on competition. And so if my dad, or not if, but when my dad would find somebody that had some type of better performance on the basketball court.
Yeah. It made you work harder.
It did. It didn't demoralize me. It made me want to prove, but it did feed the performance identity.
Yeah.
And so I grew up with that thinking, well, this is normal. This is the way everybody on the planet must be motivated. So if I'm motivated by, well, we can always be better, I'm going to go figure out how I can.
Yeah.
Not everybody recognize or is fueled the same way.
Yeah.
And, I didn't recognize that.
Well, you bring up an interesting topic about feeling like there was this thing in you that thought if you did praise the effort, you didn't want your kids or me to feel like there was no room for improvement. I feel like sometimes we get stuck in that place of, I think that we have to encourage and love and, accept and all those things and leave those results to trusting God. Like if I thought all of my encouragement for you and, maybe not harping on every little thing that you do or whatever, if I thought that doing that was going to then just make you slide into this comfortable place of not bettering yourself, well, then I wouldn't encourage you. I would withhold some of that so you would try harder. And I think that's a dangerous place that even couples get to, like with kids, with each other, because I feel like the innate sense of working towards something is built in all of us. It might manifest differently, but at some point especially if you are a Bible believing person, like, if you're a Christ follower, you have to, there's some amount of trusting God with the results of certain things, like doing our part, to set our kids up, to encourage, to praise the effort, to encourage our spouse, and trusting that the Lord is going to continue to bring that person to wherever he wants them to go. I feel like getting caught in this all depends on me. Like if I don't say this just this way, or if I praise on effort too much, like that's control. At the heart of it, that's us trying to control the outcome. And that's where we get into trouble. Like looking back, that we should have relinquished control sooner, and just trusted, so yeah.
Pretty deep.
Those are good. Yeah.
So if we think about, again, when you're talking about praising the effort,
Yeah.
For whatever reason, my logic back then, if I praise the effort too much, the effort will cap. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Like what I was just talking about.
Yes. But based upon those studies of those little kids,
Yeah.
praising the effort gave them the confidence and the courage to keep pressing on and not giving up. Because those kids, they worked the puzzles longer. They had greater success than those that started off with being praised for performance. I also think there's a quote in the book, I forgot what chapter it is, but it's a pretty long quote about Tiger Woods. And he quotes, or he references his parents' perspective of failure or shortfall, that he knew that he could experiment with different shots, golf-wise, different things, and he knew that no matter what, when he got home, he was still accepted as their son. I just think about the Father, God, and us relationship. But he quotes his success, or he attributes his success to the way his parents viewed his shortcomings.
Oh. Wow.
And arguably the greatest golfer that, yeah. So it's like, it can happen. So again, at empty nest level, one thing we could talk about is to grandparents that one, you've reminded me of this, we are not parenting our grandkids.
Yeah.
Leave that to the parents. But we can be amazing encouragers.
Yeah.
We can fight for relationship. We can make sure that we're involved to the extent that we can, right? There's a lot of grandparents that they're far away, their health isn't good or whatever, they can't do that. But if to the extent that you can be engaged in your child or grandchild's life, be their biggest cheerleader and biggest fan club. But as parents, we've talked about several of these things, especially to the dads, make sure that you find a way to be interested in whatever your kids are interested in.
Yeah.
And don't withhold your approval or your love or your attention or your time because you're not comfortable with arts and crafts or
Or cooking.
uh,
Or whatever it is you're not comfortable with. Yeah.
right. I mean, it was so natural. I mean, you're interested in basketball? Oh, great. Let's go.
Yeah.
Or tennis
fishing.
or fly fishing.
Yeah. Yeah.
All over it. But being willing to get out of my comfort zone.
Or piano. Because
Yeah.
I was all over that
You
with
were.
Taylor. Yeah.
You
So
were.
I think too, here's one last point that I want to make. I think in raising children, whatever age they are, whatever stage of parenting that you happen to be in, I always want my children to know if something has happened, if they've done something wrong, if they've made a dumb choice, I want them to run to us. I want them to always feel safe to do that. Because what's the first thing we do? Like if we've done something grievous and bad, like we typically don't just run straight to the Father. You know, we tend to, it's like classic Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve.
Mm-hmm.
They messed up, made a bad choice. And what did they do? They hid. They didn't run to the Father. They hid because of shame. So cultivating a family atmosphere that, I'm not saying you celebrate bad choices, but you make it safe. Because if a child knows the first call that they make, whether they're in college, high school, whatever, if they make a bad grade, if they flunk a class, whatever, if their first call, if their first reaction is, I need my mom and dad, then I think it breaks a lot of shame tendencies off of kids. That stronghold of shame we don't want our kids to grow up with. So I think that is focus on how do I make our home one that they can come to me. And I think we have to develop a poker face, because if we recoil in horror and then just berate them, they're not going to feel like we're not going to be their first call. We're not going to be their first thing. They're going to hide things, you know?
And if you're not their first call, who is?
A friend or somebody that's not safe, maybe.
And I think our society today is so different than when we were raising our kids. If we're not the first, let's say we're 30-something parents, the 40s, and we've got teenagers. If we don't have that, can we get it back?
We can.
What would you say to that?
Well, nothing's ever hopeless. You can always get stuff back. But I think it takes humbling yourself, apologizing, and then following through with different behavior. You have to like trust. You can lose trust in an instant with someone. Earning it back requires more than just an apology, because words are cheap. Earning it back requires your pound of flesh, so
action.
to speak. Yeah, and by pound of flesh, I mean your action, the action behind it, and consistency.
Love the word consistency.
Yep.
Consistency compounds.
Yeah.
We talked about that on prior shows. So, any final thoughts or takeaways as far as if we could do it over again? I don't want that to be viewed from a negative perspective. There's a huge difference between regret and reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Regret is a victim perspective. Reflection is growing.
Yeah.
So there's two totally different things. Yeah. So any final thoughts or final takeaways on if I could do it over again, what would you say? Any final thoughts?
No, I think my final thought would be just to encourage parents out there, regardless of where you are, regardless of what stage you are in parenting, regardless whatever it is, it might be a marriage, situation.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's important to never lose hope. Never lose hope. Everything can be remedied. It might take time. It might take longer than a 2-hour Hallmark movie, which, I always say, I would love to live in the 2-hour Hallmark movie where all of your things get solved in 2 hours, but that's not life. You just have to work at it.
Yeah, see, that's an example of I would really have to love you to sit and watch another 2-hour Hallmark movie. I have no interest in that.
Yeah. Well, it's all
No,
about you.
the thing I love though is from a business perspective, I always tell people everything's solvable,
Yeah, it is.
right? Nothing is impossible, especially when we think of it from a faith-based. To humans, it is, but
Yeah.
with God, nothing is impossible.
Yep.
So if we are having, we have some families that are, considering the kind of culture that they have,
Yeah.
it is solvable.
Yeah.
And you have to be intentional, be willing to be inconvenienced.
Yeah.
How many times we talked about that? Anything that you want to grow in or have a better future in, it will be inconvenient to make it happen.
Yes.
But if you refuse to pay the price now,
You're going to pay later.
the price of inconvenience later will be much higher.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I think too, it's important to say that if anybody has questions or, needs coaching, to just reach out to us on YouTube, or we're on socials, and that's kind of what we do. So, yeah.
perfect. All right.
Good. That was a good talk.
Short, sweet.
Yeah. Like it. I like our new format. So until next time,
Well, ciao.
we'll chat.